lifespans through science and technology. I think it gets in the way, and I am adamantly, personally against it. In fact, I will have a speech this weekend where I will, I don't go as far as saying I want to make religion illegal, but I'm very, very, very close. And I thought very deeply in the book about actually promoting that idea. It is done irreparable damage at this point to civilization. We are thousands of years behind where we should be at this point. I feel because of just this system where we, believe in pink elephants flying around the air and then worship them and spend money. I mean, if we had all the money of the Catholic Church, all the resources of the Catholic Church, and we put it into the hands of, 5,000 of the best scientists on the planet, we would be done with mortality. That would be the end of it in probably 5 or 10 years. However, that's not how society operates or how we've set up a system. I advocate taking that money and using it towards our life, towards life extension, towards transhumanist technology. I see it as a moral problem that we don't do that. And that's why I wrote the book, to try to promote that stuff. So personally, I feel very strongly about trying to stop religion from harming society and harming individuals from living such short lives when they could be living far longer lives and far more spectacular. I mean, ultimately, they have no interest in this type of technology because they already have the afterlife all worked out in their minds, imaginary stuff. And so I'm quite against it. However, my extreme nature of looking at things is probably not the way that the civilization society will unravel. And I would prefer to have something unravel peacefully. And if I can have it unravel peacefully and also live long enough to make it to that next stage where I don't have to die, then I would be happy to do it that way. That said, I still believe we're facing a very real choice in the next 20, 30 years on whether we can actually achieve it and whether someone like me, whose father had a heart attack at 51 and I'm 40 years old, can actually make it. And so in that way, my morality is very much defined by the amount of time that I have left to live. So, I think there were two questions. And the first one is I generally am optimistic that we can do things civilly and still reach the goals of life extension. However, personally, I am pushing on a very almost militant level to achieve some of these goals now because it affects me directly. And I also think it affects millions and millions of other people directly whose lives are probably going to end in the next 10 or 15 years. And they don't necessarily need to if we would take the resources and put it in the right place.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And it's hard to draw the line because with, especially the way that Jethro comes across and some of the things he says are, very, let's say, interesting to say the least. But I don't want to take up any more time. I've been talking way too long. Matthew, I want to go ahead and hand off to you. And thanks again, Zoltan. That was really interesting.
No, and thank you for reading my book, and thank you for the excellent questions.
No problem.
I've been, Zoltan, I've been thinking about what you're saying in the book a lot. And I've been trying to temper my response to you based on whether or not Jethro Knights is sort of a wish fulfillment sort of idea for you, or if it was sort of a satirical, this is the extent that a person could go to in the pursuit of preservation of their own life. And from what I'm hearing, it's more the former than the latter. Would you say that's correct?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so I have 3 questions for you because I had 4, but you basically answered one of them already, so I'll skip over that. How much of a motivating factor do you consider fear of death when it comes to ideologies like the Abrahamic religions and any belief system that's built around avoiding death altogether? How much of that do you think is fear of death?
I got to be honest, this question's come up a lot. I'm not a man who registers fear, at least fear of death in itself, as something that really worries me. I don't think there's any real fear of it. In fact, I find it fascinating, would love to go through it. And I think my even little tribute at the end when Jethro goes looking for Zoe is there's a part of him that wants to turn every stone over and see what's there. It's just adventurous, and I find it actually fascinating. I would love to try to do such a thing if I could kind of be guaranteed to be brought back or not find that it's the end. So I don't actually think there's much fear of why I wrote the book. What I think is there's just a lot of love of life. I feel it's always love of life that is motivating me. You know, I've been lucky where I have had a nice childhood. Then I left on a sailboat through most of my 20s and, you know, spent time as a journalist and as an adventurer. And, you know, life has just been great. And therefore, I feel like I want to do what I can to defend that, to keep it. And this is kind of the natural result of that, like kind of going back to the landmine incident. It just seems wrong that in a society where we can pick up our telephones and call someone in Europe, you know, that we don't have the technology yet to keep ourselves alive. Maybe we need to just put more resources to it. So that's kind of my take on that. I don't feel it's really much of fear, but more of love of life that has driven me to write the book and say some of the things I have.
So it's more, you're thinking more of the joy that you've had living life than fear of losing it.
I believe so. You know, I don't necessarily.
I'm trying to understand what you're arguing for here, because when I read the book, and I know that you invented something like, I think it was called volcano boarding. Did I get that right? When you seem so concerned with preserving your own life, that's your highest priority, and according to the what was it called, the teleological egocentric functionalism, the number one priority is preserving your own life. So when it's a little strange for me, who's so new to these concepts, why would you be doing these things if preserving your own life is your highest priority above and beyond anyone and anything else in the entire world?
So no, and that's an excellent question. So I think two things there is, I have, since I've written the book and really thought through all the ideas, I have to some extent mellowed out. That the volcano boarding certainly took place before the book, and while that was kind of the highlight of some of the dangerous things that I have done, it's hard to know if I would actually do that again, or do some of the other things. You know, to be honest, volcano boarding was quite dangerous, but it also is a very statistical improbability that you would be hit by a lava bomb and die. That's the danger, is that a couple people have died standing around the perimeter, and so by doing the volcano boarding, these little bullets that get shot from the crater, they're big lava bombs, some of them are giant, size of a Volkswagen, they either go right on top of you or they go right through you. They're burning molten. And I would be much more skeptical to do something like that now, because I have now developed comprehensively this philosophy, and I'm also older. You know, I don't feel as invincible as I once did. So I think I would, and I like life more. Perhaps I'm older. When I did volcano boarding, I was in my 20s still, and it was we all do crazy things in our youth, I suppose. So I hope that answers it a little bit. I think it's not so much of fear, but still, things are so wonderful. And it's not even fear or necessarily love. There's just something about it. Like I said, it upsets me from a logical perspective that the world has $200 trillion of wealth, and that we just don't spend a fraction of it to develop a technology that at least gives us the option of living indefinitely.
If we had that technology, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if we had that technology and there were, say, as you said, I think you said 20 or $200 billion that you think should be spent for radical life extension?
A lot of experts think it's around 50 billion.
Okay, so let's say 50 billion. If there was $50 billion invested by governments around the world, private corporations to do this radical life extension, and the world was pulling together to make this happen, how much of a percentage of the population do you think would actually get to enjoy that technology? So,
and this is a very difficult question. And I've said this before, and I support it still, that I would like to have it so that everyone gets the option, or at least a huge, significant portion. My idea is that you need to commercialize it. You need to make it so that people will spend fortunes, their own personal fortunes, to get it. And I feel that within a few years, done properly, I mean, if you can afford to live indefinitely, let's say like a pill or something funny, I don't know, it's hard to know exactly what it's going to end up being like, but let's just say you could, how much would you pay for it? And I'm hoping that through that incentive, within a couple years of this technology and science existing, it might become like the cell phone, where over half the population actually has a cell phone now. Even if their net worth is only $100, everyone has a cell phone and everyone can afford one. Not everyone, but a solid 70% of the population now has a cell phone. And that's an incredible technology to have in your hand. And I'm hoping that we can do the same thing with life extension technology, where you can make it commercially available in a way that's cheap enough for people all around the world to embrace it. Not just the upper classes, not just the middle classes, but certainly the lower classes as well, where they would have access to it. And perhaps the only people that wouldn't would be those who either really don't want it or I mean, I'm not sure. It would be nice, in my opinion, to have everyone have it and have everyone want it. I mean, one of the basic 3 rules of transhumanism in the very beginning of the book is that if there is value in somebody, it really should be preserved. And I'm hoping that through that we could preserve all value in the universe, which means hopefully everyone, assuming that we're all kind of contributing towards civilization and the evolution of our species moving forward. So I hope everyone could get it.
Okay, I just have two more questions for you, and I appreciate your candor.
Yes, thank you for sticking around a little bit longer than we talked about. I do appreciate it, if that's okay with you.
It's definitely.
Thank you, Zoltan. Appreciate it.
The next question is: have you read a book by Frank Herbert called "The Eyes of Heisenberg"?
No, I've heard about it. I have not read it.
It's having a future setting, I believe it's several thousand years in the future, and there are a handful of people who are sort of a ruling council of the world, because they have, if you compare the ideas, it sounds like they've sort of accomplished what you are talking about with radical life extension, but they have so carefully adjusted their physiology that nothing can change for them, and it keeps them from being able to any longer relate to the other humans who have not. So they sort of look down on humans who haven't gone through life extension, whether by lack of opportunity or lack of choice, or because that technology was controlled. And that sort of, in my opinion, not only puts them as a different species, as Negation was saying, but also in a way makes them feel superior because of this technology that they've accumulated in their position in society. So I'm wondering if this radical life extension is a reality that we are moving toward. What effect do you think that's going to have on, say, most of the people who are watching this, and myself, are humanists, and we try to approach the rest of humanity with goodwill and with as altruistically as we realistically could, and with a lot of empathy. So I see that deteriorating by a real world application of the technology that you're talking about. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
So, and I couldn't agree with you more. There's no question that there's going to be haves and have-nots because of technology in the future. It's just an undemocratic. Technology is undemocratic to begin with. It just.
But see, that's what you seem to be advocating, though. It's the first rule of your 3 rules is that yourself is more important than anyone else, and rule number 3 that you listed before with the values still is trumped by rule number 1, as in Asimov's 3 rules. Nothing is more important than yourself, and that would include any children you have, your family, anyone else. So if nothing else is ever as important as your own self-preservation, I don't see how you could preserve a sense of empathy towards others, especially if you have this massive physiological difference between yourself and other human beings.
No, so you're correct in that, because the first law would, essentially disqualify all that. That said, you're hoping that whatever anyone else has is some type of contribution towards the universe in a valuable way. And in that sense, I'm hoping that while I might always, at least would see myself as the top of the pyramid, there are very many reasons to preserve the rest of the pyramid.